All right, well, we'll welcome everyone out to Planning Commission tonight, August 3rd. Thanks for being here. Commissioner Carroll is going to do our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, we have a heavy agenda tonight, so we'll get going. The first thing on there is minutes. I would entertain a motion on minutes.
I move we approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion
I'll second.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next on the agenda, we have a zone change public hearing, Shelly Subdivision.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and start describing it as we get the presentation pulled up. Appreciate you being here tonight. The request and the applicant, she is here tonight as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask either staff or the applicant. We hope to be able to answer any questions you might have. So this is on Slant Road, east side of town. And the applicant is looking to do a master plan development. The first step is a rezone of the property. Currently, portions of it are zoned R3, and a portion of it is zoned R115. And so after review with the DRC and with staff, the decision was made to move forward with the current request, which is an R19 subdivision. It didn't necessarily yield or result in many additional lots. And the main intent with the subdivision was try and mirror and match the lot sizes that are existing to the north of the development. As you can see, there's a rather large existing structure there that would be on lot 3, which would be part of phase 2. The first phase is the east side of the development, so you can see the drive that would connect, come down south and then connect over to Spanish Fork Parkway. With the master plan development, we do have the requirement that there's a certain average lot size that's met. With the proposed R19, that would be 9,000 or larger, and the average is larger than 9,000 square feet.
Does that include lot 1, 2, and 3 to get to the average?
It includes a percentage of it. So the way the code is written is if the zone is R19, you can't count more than double that base lot size for the R19. So in this case, some of these are over 30,000 square feet in size, but we only give them
18,000?
18,000. Yep.
Brandon, so with that, is it, even with that, are they the same size as this, as you're coming down this road, would they appear to be the same size? And
Yes, that was the intent.
okay.
Yeah, and so for instance, this one is over 9,000. Some of these, as they get closer to this one, are in the 6, 7 range, kind of similar to what these are. And then some of these are in the 8, 9 range.
I could actually, so I looked it up too, Brandon, because Todd's question was my question. If you guys, so this lot right here is 6,273 square feet. This one's 7,063. This one's 6,532. This one's 9,391. This one's 9,322. And then, like he said, 7,462, 6,776 right there, and 6,991, and then 9,243. So they're pretty similar, just to answer your question, more specific.
Variety of widths and lot sizes. Okay, yep.
I'm getting dizzy.
Deep breath. All right. So this is just showing, this is the exhibit showing the current zoning. A little bit of cleanup that needs to take place with this and as well as after this. Here's the structure that I'm referring to. The applicant is looking to retain it. The DRC did kind of speak through some of the concerns that they may have in the future as far as uses of the structure or impacts it may have, but did not feel removal of it was warranted. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Next slide, please. So this is the phasing plan, and this has been updated. And so if you look at the staff report, condition number 3 was a directive from the DRC that the proposed lot 9, which is this lot right here, be included with the first phase. Originally, it was not. And so the applicant has updated the phasing plan. So this purple shading would be the first phase with the partial connection out to Spanish Fork Parkway. And then the second phase would be inclusive of the trail dedication to the city, as well as 3 larger lots. Any questions on the proposal? Or if we jump one more slide, sorry. So the applicant did indicate that they are finalizing the builders right now, and these are potentially some of the styles of product that they anticipate seeing built. I think that's the last slide for this item. Yep. Any questions for staff?
This is not part of Legacy Farms?
No, this is outside of Legacy Farms.
So the development across the street that's
The
in the R3,
townhomes?
those are townhomes?
Yeah. This is the Legacy Farms townhomes. This is Legacy Farms in the yellow. And then the black area outlines the current proposal, the Shelly subdivision.
One of the key issues, Brandon, is street tree plan in the staff's notes.
Yes, so that has been requested, and we anticipate receiving that from the applicant.
And that will be required as part of the approval of the master plan development?
Yes. Yep.
Any other questions for staff? Right, and you said the applicant is here, right?
Yes, Julie is.
Do you want to speak to any of that?
No, I just appreciate working with staff on that. The only comment I did have was the city will be purchasing the corridor. So that wasn't, that's fee-owned, title-owned by Mr. Adams, where north of it, it was owned by Rocky Mountain. So that's the one difference. And then I'm also working with Mr. Ireland and Mr. Bingham below. So we're working right now and coming in on a zone change on that one. I believe we're going to do a master plan with the underlying R16. So these lots will be a little bit big compared to what's on top and what's below, but also on Slant Road, we wanted to keep that integrity that we have with Mr. Bingham, Mr. Ireland, and the 3 large lots that we have on Slant Road. Kind of as you drive there, those are really nice homes there, and we wanted to keep that feel, that farm feel there.
Any questions for the applicant?
How quickly is phase 2 plan, like is there an imminent specific plan for phase 2?
Right now, just tax problem, because he's owned this property before when it was in Utah County, and then it got annexed into Spanish Fork. So he's owned it for quite a long time, so his tax base is pretty low. So right now, he's just going to do that portion, and then probably in another tax year, he'll do the other part.
All right, any other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you. All right, this is a public hearing, so we will go into a public hearing. Just some baselines for public hearings. Not a ton of people here tonight, but we ask that you keep your comments to three minutes, and any comments that you have, make them during that portion. When we close public hearing, those public comments are over, so just know that. So with that, we will go into public hearing. Anyone here to speak to this? Seeing none, we'll go out of public hearing.
So, there's a question. I'm a property owner that's affected by the annexation.
Okay, that'll be the next item.
Okay, just
Yep.
making sure. Thank
Yep.
you.
Any discussion points on this? All right, if none, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. Mr. Chairman, I move that the Shelly subdivision primary plat and zone change be recommended for approval based on staff's finding and conditions.
Okay, we got a motion
Second?
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. All right, next, annexation, Oberg annexation.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Near the end of 2021, you reviewed an annexation of some properties that are just north of what we're talking about tonight. That was known as the Utah West annexation, in the area that I guess I would describe as being east of, nope, not east at all, west of PDM Steel, which is located right here. Wasatch Pallet is being relocated to this site right here. This is 19th North. Nope. Once again, wrong. This is 19th North right here. Clune Industries is located right there. So again, Utah West was there. Tonight we're talking about what's shown in yellow there. The proposed Oberg annexation, which includes about 70 acres. Another thing that I think is a little bit relevant to what we'll talk about in a minute, the Utah West annexation, that occurred ultimately with a couple of things happening. That was zoned Industrial 1, I-1 at the time of annexation. That was something that we spent quite a bit of time talking with the Planning Commission and City Council about. And ultimately, the council felt comfortable going ahead and having it ultimately zoned for its end use, anticipated end use at the time of annexation, particularly because of an annexation agreement that the applicant entered into that I believe very clearly defines what improvements need to be made before any development activity can occur within those lands that are tied by legal description to that annexation agreement. Again, just to the north of what we're talking about tonight. That really is the proposal with this annexation as well. In fact, we have a draft agreement that we're working on. We hope to have that finished up early next week. And it's really safe and accurate to say that the improvements that would be required to have development happen on any part of the Oberg annexation are identical to what would be required with that previously approved Utah West annexation that was approved last year. We will have an exhibit in the agreement that defines where roads need to be constructed, what utilities need to be put in place, and different things like that. And it is very, very similar to what was included as that exhibit with the Utah West annexation. So it's really only with some level of assurance that not only the applicant that is the proponent for the annexation and getting the properties to that state within the city, also in this case having them zoned for development, not only do we think it's important that they be aware of the needs and they understand the city's expectations and requirements, but the type of agreement that I'm describing gets recorded with the Utah County Recorder's Office, because oftentimes properties change hands. They are sold, and ultimately the folks that work to develop a property aren't the ones that we work with at a stage like this where an annexation is proposed and is being reviewed. So that certainly is one of the things in my mind that's a little bit unique with this, although we have been very aggressive as the city in, I would say recent years, but even going back 10 or 12 years that I can think of in terms of zoning properties proactively for industrial development in this part of the city. That's happened in a few particular places. Over here on the west side of 300 West, we started doing that. And even the city, for example, was a proponent for an annexation that is now under development on the south side of 10th North over in this area. When we realized through the process of having people come to Spanish Fork looking for sites where they could put a manufacturing facility, and us trying to match their utility needs with properties that could be developed, and found that because of a power substation that exists right here and other utilities that were in close proximity even years ago, that this area has for some time been an area that can support some heavy utility needs and that type of a thing. which I mentioned just by way of a little bit more background to just the overall concept that we have anticipated for quite some time, that properties in this area would develop non-residentially. I think that's at least part of the reason that this comes before you tonight with a recommendation from the Development Review Committee that the annexation be approved with light industrial zoning, but for 1 acre. That's, we'll zero in on that in just a second. The property owner there has requested that be zoned rural residential at the time of annexation. We as staff see no problem at all in having that be the case, so certainly willing to recommend that we respect the wishes of that property owner. With the applicant being willing to enter into a development agreement that we think provides all the assurance that's necessary, that there won't be any arguments or misunderstandings or confusion about what's required before the city will entertain ultimately the issuance of a building permit for construction in the area. We think this is as good of a time as any to move forward and even set the stage for development by having the zoning assigned like we're talking about. Maybe one last thing for me, this image does a good job of illustrating a void. There is an island here that is just about 50 acres in size. It's not an island yet, but if this annexation ultimately happens, you can see that as described here, which the lack of color here means that it's not included either in the city boundary as it sits today, nor as part of the annexation. It would be an island of unincorporated Utah County land that would stay that way until something changes in the future. This is something that we historically have not seen. And it's been that way for a number of reasons. One of the biggest has been that Spanish Fork and other cities don't like to do that. There's very little sensible, there's nothing sensible about creating boundaries that either look very gerrymandered or that create islands, big peninsulas, or otherwise just create situations where there's some lack of a logic in terms of our ability to provide services and that type of a thing. However, back in 2017, I believe it was, the state legislature changed a really important provision of the state law in terms of annexations that made it impossible for cities to force people to annex as part of a larger annexation. That had been the case for many decades up to that point in time. So today, in order for an annexation like this to proceed, we work with Utah County, as the state law does provide for the creation of things like this, an island, so long as the governing body in the county approves it. So as part of the process that we've been through to get to this point on this proposed annexation, the Oberg annexation, the applicants have actually approached Utah County. They've worked with the county legal department, who has worked with the county commission, and they've had an agenda item on the county commission agenda for some meeting that happened in recent months, where the county commission said, we approve of the annexation being created in this particular way, understanding still that it will leave this area in the county. Do you guys have any questions about that?
What's currently in the island? Is it residential?
Residential, that by way of, I think there being 3 homes there and just some farms, really. Yeah, there might be 4 homes there.
What would, what would be the drawbacks of being a county island in the middle of a city?
You know, I don't know that for the people that are there necessarily there's a drawback. I personally, if I were in that situation, I would much prefer to be in the city and to at least be able to access what comes with having or there being in this case, a Spanish Fork property owner, being able to tie into utilities, and otherwise just getting a library card, as a resident versus paying a non-resident rate, and just some of those probably less significant things, but just having some of those benefits that come from being a property owner in a city. From, for example, like a property tax perspective and that type of a thing, historically there really hasn't been a difference between the city's property tax levy and that what Utah County applies. So not a big difference there at all. But yeah, sometimes it's just an emotional thing, I think, as well. Some people just don't want to change. And I think to some extent that's the case with some of the people that would be on this island.
Has the county indicated when they will and when they won't approve an island? Like, is there certain things that they're looking for?
That I'm aware of, no. Except,
Case by case.
you know, and take this for what it's worth, but we've actually approached the county now 3 times in recent months with situations like this, where an island would be created. And I heard through kind of a back channel that at least the county attorney's office is feeling like, hey, this was sort of intended to be the exception and not the norm. And it's become the norm. And, you know, to some extent that's regrettable, I think. But at the same time, share a little bit more of my personal beliefs about this. We're looking at another annexation that you quite possibly will see in September where, use round numbers, but I believe there are about 150 acres included altogether in the annexation. And there is a 5-acre parcel right now that is in between properties that are owned by people that want to be annexed into Spanish Fork and Spanish Fork's current city boundary. And should the county not, you know, be cooperative to allow us to create that island, you have a 5-acre parcel whose owner is really upending the wishes of a bunch of other property owners that would like to have access to things that you know, having properties in Spanish Fork in this case, you know, what that can offer. And at least historically, the statute was written so that that couldn't be the case, to where it was more of a majority rule. In fact, it was a super majority rule for a long time, even to where it had to be you know, much more than just 50% of, you know, property area and value and things like that that were taken into consideration. So can't certainly speak for the county going forward as to what, you know, they'll think about continuing to approve things like this. But there's also some hope that the state statute changes maybe this next legislative session in 2023 to in some ways go back to the form that existed pre-2017 when the change was made that kind of upended some things.
But it's become the norm because of that law? Become more of a norm?
Yeah, so for example, and I'll use, again, the annexation that I think you'll see next month as an example because it's really clear. 150 acres, total of 5 acres that don't want to be brought into the city in the past. And there's a downside to this, and I certainly understand that. And having property owners annexed may be against their wishes, but there simply was a numerical analysis that was done to determine if the majority of the property owners included in an annexation, I need to say it differently, that's actually not right, but if the majority of the property included in an annexation by area was owned by people that wanted to be annexed, and the majority of the property by value was owned by people that wanted to be annexed, then you could have some minority portion of an annexation brought in, you know, maybe without their consent or even against their wishes, which frankly ultimately then gets even left to the city council. But legally, the council could approve annexations where maybe not all of the property owners wanted to see that happen. Now it's any property owner that has a full acre of land, they have to sign a petition to be included. And, you know, once you hit that threshold of having a full acre, then we end up with this situation if somebody doesn't want to be included. Does that answer your question?
Are each of the property owners affected by this project and this annexation in favor of the annexation?
That's my understanding, yes.
Where's the 1 acre rural residential portion?
Can you zoom in? Yeah, do we? Thanks. It's right here. So it's a dwelling. In this case, it's actually just under an acre of land that they have, approximately an acre. Well, okay. There will be a disagreement on that, but it doesn't matter. We're totally fine with it being rural residential.
And then
Question.
I don't know if it's time. I had just a housekeeping item I noticed on page 5 of the annexation feasibility report. it mentions that it is not anticipated that there will be an annexation agreement with this annexation, but the staff report mentions that there will be. So I just want to make sure our motion's clear one way or the other.
And we need to get that fixed. Thank you. It's a
Okay.
good catch. Appreciate that.
Question about the landowners here. They have been in for a lot of the annexation conversations that we've had in the last little bit. What are their feelings on this? Have they expressed?
Yeah.
Obviously, they're not part of the annexation, right?
Right, and I never like to speak for somebody, so let me
Right.
offer that as my disclaimer, but we had I really appreciate it. It's Lynn and Millie Ablanop, if I pronounce it right, that own that property there. They own 14 acres altogether, kind of one home and maybe a second that could be finished there. We had a great meeting with them yesterday, particularly to talk about this annexation and some other things that might.
This over here?
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah. Again, I hate to speak for them, but they're talking about potentially annexing into the city. So there's some comfort with that as a concept. They don't, I think, at all love the idea that the properties around them are going to most likely develop non-residentially, but I think they've accepted that. And I think they're making plans, even with that being the case, to continue to have that be their home for decades to come, is my understanding. We discussed, we talked, for example, about ag protection and, whether in this case that would be helpful or necessary. And the most important thing that we discussed, and I just talked with Mr. Jensen and Mr. Simpson about this, one of the council's conditions of approval, in fact, on the Utah West annexation was that with that annexation, which included lands to the north of the Applanops, that they be granted a way to access a public street aside from using what I think in some ways is a deficient crossing of a railroad track and just a fairly unique way of accessing their property. And they've been provided some means of access. And we talked about the idea that, this is the way, or this is the time to memorialize that, probably in the form of a recorded easement, certain width, and some different things like that. That is a very significant concern for the Ablanops, and certainly for us as the city as well.
So is that part of the previous annexation's requirements, or should that be part of this annexation?
No.
It's both. It's both. I think with this annexation, it's really the right time to further refine that and to very clearly define exactly what that is, which might not even mean, I'm just throwing out a thought here, it might not even mean necessarily that the exact location is defined. It could be kind of a floating easement, but, for this particular width, tying into it, in this case, it's been represented by the applicants of the annexation that they would prefer probably to have that connection go to the north up to, what is 1900 north. So essentially going from, and maybe Mike, it might be better to go back to the bigger image, the broader one. Somehow getting from the properties located right here up to the closest public street to the north.
Road dedication to the city?
I think it's much more of a private,
Okay.
driveway easement, something like that. We talked about 20 feet, which I know for our fire department's going to be an important width to.
I know another one of their concerns was just the rail spur, and maybe the applicants can talk to this, so maybe I'm getting ahead. But there's been talk of rail spurs coming in front or on the other side of their house, which was a concern with medical issues and emergencies, that kind of stuff. Is there still a plan for a rail spur there? Do you know?
If you don't mind, I'll let the applicant speak to that, yeah.
Also, could you overlay the general plan on this area? Okay, what is gray?
Industrial.
It is industrial, so it's consistent with the general plan. And what's green again?
Agricultural.
Light red.
What's light red? What's pink and red?
It's not in our plan.
Oh, gotcha.
So the real red's
So- oh, okay,
commercial.
there it
Oh,
is.
gotcha.
That makes more sense.
City boundary a little bit.
Okay, that makes
I
sense.
I wasn't familiar with light red, and that's why.
So the idea of an easement then would be something that the staff would put together with the applicant from the time of our meeting until it was presented to council? And then hammer out those details, or how would that condition be stated?
Hopefully, it's even more simple than that. It's just something that the applicant puts together. I think it's worth getting the Albanops, sign off on. I think that is an important part of getting the council comfortable, acting on this annexation. And it really becomes more of a private matter between them than something the city is involved in, other than probably just to make sure that it happens.
So we could, hey, make sure that they've approved it before it goes to the city council, or make that
That's
part
what
of
I'm
our
wondering, how we
condition,
make
yeah.
that requirement.
Because them on that island, they really only have that one access. These two up here have a little bit more access, or a little bit more freedom of travel.
Quite a bit more. They have frontage right now on Third West.
So it's a
Yeah.
little bit less concerning there.
That's a separate owner?
This is just
Yeah.
Jerry Merrill's
two
farm, that's
houses,
just his
yeah.
farm, right?
I thought there was a house over there. Am I wrong?
No.
Okay.
There's a building, yeah. Is there a building here too, though? That south side?
Yes.
I think there's a little house.
But Jesse, but what changes from today, right?
Right, no, I'm saying for them, I think there's nothing different, but from the, like, if whatever builds here, right? If it cuts off, like, the railroad is the big thing for me. If it cuts off access for them, I think it would be important that they have that in writing, that they're gonna be taken care of.
Is that property, I don't know if this applicant has ownership of that property that you're talking about for the road to the north, does it? I'm just looking at this aerial. I don't know if we can handle that tonight.
In this direction here?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
So I think regardless of ownership, just as an applicant of an annexation in this case, I believe city staff, and I think our city council as well, would be comfortable with the access being granted across what's currently included in the annexation, going to the west over to this existing street right here, or going to the north. In any event, I think we've simply looked at it as an issue for the applicant to resolve in either way that they can go. And again, I'm not wanting to speak for the Albanops to say that they're good with either of those two things, but I think providing access is, I know it's a very important issue for them. And yesterday we talked about either of those two routes. And certainly between now and a council meeting, I think we'd want to have, right, just by way of courtesy, we'll talk to the Albanops to make sure they understand what's going on and try to make sure everybody's on the same page. And I do think this is a big enough issue, access-wise, that, short of maybe the applicants here just absolutely going nuts to get on an agenda before that's resolved, we would have big reservations as staff with having this on an agenda for the council to consider, feeling like it's probably a waste of time until that access issue is.
So that's what I was wondering when that would be defined, but yeah.
We talked about by Monday, is what we talked about by, so, well in advance of the council meeting. if
Do
that
we
can happen.
anticipate the rail spur cutting off their existing access right here? Is that going away?
I understand that the railroad would like to see that closed now, and part of where we as staff are coming from in support of having a different access provided to the Ablanop home is understanding that that is something that railroad is actively pursuing. Now, the railroad can't just take it away. There are other things that come into play there
Have
for
you told
sure.
them if they connect Spanish Fork Parkway that maybe they can talk to us?
Without a doubt, that's part of the conversation,
Okay.
truthfully.
That's good.
Like, for example, if that crossing were to close, we would want that to be counted as a closed crossing for purposes of getting a new crossing created someplace, for sure. Now, part of the reality of this particular location and that crossing, with this spur here that is now operational, I understand, at least the likelihood is greater that that's gonna be impassable as trains simply go through the movement that they make to get to them from the Wasatch Pallet site to the south. That's not good for anybody, right?
Right.
That is a bad thing, to have any dwellings completely cut off from an access perspective, so that's part of the concern.
Who owns this, Dave, right here? Right across right there.
This property is owned by I would just say the Obergs. I don't know. Okay, it's,
You are under contract to purchase it, or you've purchased it? You currently own it? You satisfied my question.
I don't know if I missed anything. I probably
Any
did.
questions for staff at this point? Okay, we want to invite the applicant to come up, say anything they want to say.
My name is John Jensen. First, thank you for letting us be on your agenda tonight. It is good to be in Spanish Fork. Appreciate the members of the commission addressing our agenda item. What questions can we answer for you?
Is that, I guess my first question was, is that rail spur, because I know we've had a lot of discussions about the rail spur, but is there still plans on putting one through this property here?
The rail spur is planned.
Okay.
Until it's built, I guess we can't
Yeah,
completely say it will be there, but we've made efforts.
but it's anticipated.
Yeah. And just to add to your question, or the answer to the question, the rail spur doesn't encumber, encroach, cross over our boundary, which is an answer to our neighbor's property. The current access is separate from us, separate from, say, that rail spur. And to formally and verbally state it here, there will be a satisfactory formalization of that access, additional access for our neighbor, both to the neighbor and to the city by Monday. We fully intend to help satisfy that.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay,
Thank you.
might have more later.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we will go into public hearing, again, 3 minutes, and then
Is
speak
this
during this
public
time.
hearing?
Yes, it is.
Start on the agenda.
Oh, it's not a public hearing? Okay. Okay. There was a resident that wanted to speak to his property. Do you want to come up to the mic and speak to that? I thought it was a public hearing, my bad.
Hello, my name is Dan Burchett. I'm the property owner of the 1 acre in question. And I just want to clarify that all of my closing documents do say 1 acre. All the county documents do say specifically 1 acre, so I do not have less than 1 acre. I feel that's important. Initially, I was opposed to the annexation because it just was sprung upon us. Nobody had come and contacted us or told us anything was going on until my neighbors started selling their properties. We've lived there for 3 years. Previous to that, my wife and I lived in Spanish Fork. I grew up in Spanish Fork. I went to high school here in Spanish Fork. I work in Spanish Fork. I love Spanish Fork, but we moved to the county so we could afford be afforded some of the benefits that come with the county. So we were under the process of learning what was going on with the annexation. I had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Simpson and with several people here at the city, and we withdrew our protest of the annexation under the conditions or the agreement that we would be allowed to remain rural residential. We only have 1 acre, but it is an important 1 acre to us. We have livestock and chickens and lots of different things that we do out there, and we do feel like we're kind of the small fish in the sea here, and we're going to get swallowed up by warehouses and businesses and stuff, and we don't really know what's going on, and it's been pretty scary for us. It's a big investment for us, and it really affects our entire life to have this going on, but we're willing to join the city. Like I say, I love Spanish Fork. I have nothing bad to say about the city. I'm a big fan. We're looking forward to being able to participate in maybe some of the utilities and stuff, but we know that our time is probably limited out there with the way things are going, and somebody wants to stick a warehouse on top of us. What are we going to do? I can't live in a warehouse. So I do just want to say on record that we do wish to join the annexation. We withdrew our protest formally. It was recognized by the county, signed by everybody involved, and so we don't have any concerns about that anymore. We just don't know what's going to happen to us out there, and we don't know what to do or who to talk to. So I'm glad to be here. I didn't know about this meeting until 5 minutes before it started, and I was 15 minutes away. So I'm glad you were number 2 on the docket, so thank you. I don't know what else I can say to you. It has really impacted our water out there. We live on a well and have a pond there on our property that is drying up because all the water is disappearing. So that's pretty concerning. The house was built in 1974. There's always been fish in the pond, as far as I know, and they all died this year due to drought, and the pond's got about a foot in it. So that's concerning to us, and we don't know what to do about it because, you know, the city continues to grow, the population keeps expanding. Where's all the water going to come from? You know, being out there in the agricultural belt, so to speak, that's something that we're concerned about. I don't know if you have any questions for me, but I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any discussion points, questions?
I have just, to make that point clear, you wish to be annexed now as part of this annexation,
Yes, as rural residential, we'll make
and you'll stay RR, and that will allow you to stay there as long as you wish, right?
That was my understanding from what we talked about with the county and with the city as well.
John, he could stay there even if it was industrial, but we'll just leave that alone.
But that will give you the opportunity to hook on to the utilities that are in your area, namely sewer and water, you hope. Okay, thank you.
And pressurized irrigation?
If it's there, yeah. You've lived with the road being torn up for a year now.
It's been a challenge, but our section of the road is done, and
Yeah.
I will say, I don't know who's involved with the crew, maybe the city engineer, but the construction company hired has always been very friendly and considerate, and I've been really appreciative of those guys. Other than that, it's good.
Very good.
It's good.
I have a question for Mr. Jensen about, do you have imminent plans for development? And tell us about with your developments, with your relationship with neighbors.
Yeah, thank you. The intent is to develop soon. Soon in development world is generally longer than most people would like. Maybe they'd like it to take longer, but yeah, there's probably about a year to 2 years before buildings go in. A lot of people would like to work and build and produce things today. There will be utilities that have to be brought in, storm drain has to be resolved, or put in. So all that work has to be done, the backbone work. So that's probably going to put a little bit of a delay in when you see changes to buildings and stuff like that. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, tell us about when you're doing all those kind of things, what kind of communication and developing next to neighbors.
Yeah. So at least for me, not that everybody does this, but we go and talk to everybody. To annex a property, you generally have to get a ping of some sort from your neighbors. That could look as formal as them signing a paper saying, I want to be a part of it. In the Utah West annexation that we did previous to this, the Keith Peterson property isn't necessarily part of our development, but they were interested in being part of the annexation. And so sometimes people say we want to go in, and some people say they don't want to be in it, and sometimes the city and the county and applicants have to work together to allow for islands and things like that where appropriate. We approached every neighbor that exists in this map. There was a belief that properties that were less than 1 acre weren't needed to voice. I think that was a misunderstanding on our part. I think Mr. Brachet has clearly made his desire not to be discounted, which we would agree with. And so we are glad to help one another get to wherever we needed to be. So apologies for any misunderstanding there, but we just had a different policy understanding at the point. Talked to the Alpenops. They weren't terribly happy that their farms were going to change, but talked to the Johnsons, talked to Mr. J. Merrill. All interesting, but generally that's the process. You just try to do a minimum to just say, hey folks, we're here, this is the applicant, maybe there's a chance to talk. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's not.
So while you're there, this residence here and that 1 acre and this little piece here are not part of this annexation?
I believe they are.
Or they are?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So there shouldn't be any other,
So it looks.
yeah, you can
Yeah.
see that.
Very good.
And they've signed the petition to be annexed.
Your neighbors.
Mike.
Very good.
What else?
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? Nope. Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions on this?
Shauna's question is, how many property owners are part of this swath of land? Does anyone know?
Is there a way to see property lines?
Parcels? And Dave had previously said all of them are in favor of this.
Here you go.
And which one is your piece on there?
On the left side of the screen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, most of those promises are, yeah, so. Same person.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna say we're all the same piece.
Oh, okay.
Dave owns some, we own some, friends own some.
There's probably 4 property owners. Dan, Mike, myself, and Jim. And Mike was notified of this meeting tonight. He said, "Good." That's Mike Bolson.
And have you purchased his property as well?
No,
He's just okay with the annexation? Okay.
and signed the petition.
But the other small piece on the other side of the road, you did purchase it? Is that right? The small triangle
Oh,
piece
yes,
here?
the triangle is
Yeah. Okay.
from John Davis.
Staff, do you need any additional language on the conditions of the annexation agreement and the access? Or do you feel like the findings and conditions that you have there covers that? Or do you want that beefed up?
Yeah, maybe I would answer that this way. The draft.
Don't answer with a question. Just kidding. Just kidding. Go ahead.
So my answer is no. We're already well down the path of having an agreement written that would clearly put the world on notice that in order for any properties in this area to develop, there are certain improvements that have to be made, which is probably our biggest concern. And then, like I said, that issue relative to getting access to the Ablanops property, I'm completely confident that either that gets addressed or the annexation stalls in some way. So I don't think that being said, you're welcome to do whatever you want, of course, as part of any motion that you make, but I think
you feel comfortable with finding the as stated that covers it?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dave.
All right, with that, then I'd entertain a motion.
I will move that the proposed annexation be recommended for approval, subject to the findings and the conditions that are listed, including that the annexation be zoned I-1.
Except for the 1 acre. And RR.
And-
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, we got a motion
I'll second it.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. No other discussion items tonight on the agenda. And then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
So moved.
Okay, we got a motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.